I didn't expect to fall in love that winter. And certainly not with a voice the whole town listened to. While I was just trying to make sure no one broke a hip at Christmas. Hollyridge smelled like pine, reheated coffee, and glittery Christmas stress. In other words, peak season for me. The Hollyridge Community Center was in full pre-apocalypse mode. Boxes of lights, red tablecloths, kids sprinting like they were training for the Olympics, volunteers having opinions about everything. A choir of retired gentlemen arguing over the proper key of Silent Night. And me right in the middle clutching my folder of lists, wearing my green hoodie that said Team Christmas. My name is Hanna Valdés. I'm 41, a Taurus, curvy, and the director of this organized circus. I love 3 things in this life: good food, soft blankets, and plans that don't change at the last minute. So, of course, the universe decided I should coordinate people for a living. Hanna, should the chairs go in rows or in a semicircle? Tim, one of the volunteers, asked, holding 2 chairs like they were existential dilemmas. Semicircle, I said. That way it looks like we like each other. And don't forget aisles for the giant winter coats. I don't want casualties from a down jacket avalanche. From the hall window, you could see Hollyridge's main square, where Town Hall had just installed the big Christmas tree. Tonight was the official lighting, music, hot chocolate, and a live broadcast from the local radio station. And that's where this year's novelty came in. The morning show hosted by the new radio guy, the famous Parker Sloan. Half the town knew him, and the other half pretended they only listened in the background, while actually quoting his jokes in the grocery store. I'd heard him some mornings while making lists. Warm voice. Playful, the kind that could make you confess your debit card PIN if you're not careful. Relax, Hanna. It's just a voice. It can't hurt you from an antenna. Something brushed my leg. I looked down. Nibla, my gray Persian cat, glided majestically between cables and feet, like none of this chaos had anything to do with her. Her long silver coat fell like a luxury fur, and her amber eyes judged everything. Don't look at me like that, Nibla, I muttered. You don't have to get the mayor, the choir, the Boy Scouts, and the baking grandmas to agree on anything. She yawned and hopped onto a decorations box, curling up like a gray cloud. Remote supervision. Then the radio station's jingle blasted through the speakers set up outside in the square. Cheerful music, jingle bells, and the voice I already recognized. Good morning, Hollyridge. Parker Sloan here, Liv, officially reporting that the epicenter of Christmas is about to explode. With spirit, of course. I'm outside the community center, where it looks like someone mixed a craft workshop with an artificial snow disaster. Several volunteers laughed. I rolled my eyes. Great, I muttered. A Gemini with a microphone narrating my life in real time. What could possibly go wrong? The front door flew open with a rush of icy air. A tall man walked in navy coat, burgundy scarf, knit hat in his hand. Dark brown hair falling in messy waves like he traveled with a personal fan. Headphones half on and a microphone with the station logo. Am I allowed in, or is this a restricted war zone? He asked, smiling, so that was the face that came with the voice. If you trip over a box of lights and take it down, it counts as enemy fire, I said, crossing my arms. But sure. Come in, I guess. He lifted the mic to his mouth. Dear listeners, I've just been warned by the highest authority in this Christmas command center. Name, General? Hanna Valdés, I said, lifting my chin. Director of the community center. Hanna Valdés, he repeated, and my name in his voice sounded like the introduction of someone important. Sign? A ripple of laughter moved through the room. I narrowed my eyes at him. Seriously? I asked. You're an astrologer now? It's scientific, he defended himself. In this town, not a single garland gets hung without the horoscope's approval. I'm a Gemini, by the way. Just so you can start processing that. That explains a lot, I muttered, mostly to myself. What sign are you, Hanna? He insisted. Mike still live. Perfect. Live, on-air astral humiliation. Taurus, I answered. So my priorities right now are making this go well, making sure nobody breaks a hip in the square, and making sure the hot chocolate is decent. A volunteer clapped from the back. Parker grinned, clearly entertained. Noted. Don't disappoint a Taurus in charge of Christmas, he said into the mic. Hanna, can I ask what you love most about Christmas in Hollyridge? Short answer, I promised I wouldn't kidnap you for more than 30 seconds. I took a breath. This part one could do. The mix, I said. The smell of cookies coming out of houses, the lights hanging crooked on some streets. People pretending they don't know anything while knowing exactly who's mad at who. Rumors travel faster than reindeer here. And still, when someone's having a hard time, there's an avalanche of Tupperware and hands ready to help. A brief silence followed, the kind that means the words actually landed. Parker smiled, but softer this time. If anyone wants to know what Christmas in Hollyridge is really about, he told the audience, I think we just got the official definition. Thank you, Hanna. He stepped slightly away from the mic, lowering his voice. Mind if I hang around for a bit and watch you organize the chaos? I promise I won't get in the way, much. That's for me to decide, I said. And if you step on a cable, Nibla executes you. Nibla? He asked, glancing around. As if summoned, the cat cracked one eye open from her box. Her, I pointed, gray Persian. Reincarnation of a very demanding queen. Parker approached slowly, crouching so he wouldn't look like a giant. Hi, Nibla, he murmured. I'm Parker, Gemini. I come in peace. And cookies. He offered his hand so she could sniff him. Against all odds, Nibla didn't run. She sniffed, let out a tiny approving huff, and allowed him to pet her. Feline betrayal. All right, I said. If Nibla approves you, you're one step ahead. But that doesn't give you chair-moving rights. He straightened up with that dangerous smile that knows it works. Deal, he said. I talk, you command. Perfect Taurus Gemini balance. As he walked off to keep narrating for the radio, I felt something like a flutter in my stomach. I ignored it. I had 100 things to do and zero mental space for pretty voices and almost 30-somethings. To be fair, the coat looked really good on him. And the shoulders, too. But that's not the point, Hanna. Focus on the chairs. Christmas was about to begin. And I still didn't know that voice was about to turn upside down more than just the programming schedule. The day after the community center chaos, Hollyridge woke up covered in a fresh layer of snow, the kind that turns a town into a perfect postcard, and the sidewalks into an extreme sport. I'd survived a passive-aggressive email from the mayor about optimizing entry and exit flow, 3 voice messages from the mother of the baby Jesus in the living nativity, and 2 volunteers screaming at each other about the size of the boughs on the columns. I deserved a prize. My prize, as almost always, was called Snowberry Cafe. I pushed the door open and a wave of freshly ground coffee, brown sugar, and cinnamon rolls hugged me like a heated blanket. The little bell chimed over my head, and I spotted Harper behind the counter wearing a dancing reindeer sweater and a high bun so perfect it defied gravity and the laws of physics. That face, she said, pointing at me with the milk jug, is the face of, I've met the new guy from the radio. It's the face of, I need caffeine or I'm resigning from Christmas. I shot back, hanging my coat on the rack. The other thing does not have to be a conversation topic. Harper smiled the way only best friends do when they can smell gossip from miles away. Then I'll start with the caffeine and we'll see later if we talk about the Gemini, she said. The usual? The usual, but with extra chocolate. It's been a very retrograde Saturn kind of morning. I sat at my usual table in the corner, where I could see almost the whole square. Through the window, the giant town hall tree stood tall, lights still unlit, snow piled in little mounds around it. A few seconds later, I saw a gray puffball crossing the sidewalk with dignified purpose. Nibla, my gray Persian cat, walked as if she were wearing invisible heels, shaking tiny snowflakes off her sleek coat. She stopped in front of the cafe door and meowed once clear, demanding. Coming, Your Majesty, Harper murmured, opening the door with her foot without stopping her milk foaming. Nibla entered like the place belonged to her, located me with a single look, and marched over. She jumped onto the chair beside mine, turned twice, and curled up like someone who had made a reservation. Don't think I didn't notice your betrayal yesterday with Mr. Nice Voice, I told her under my breath. Grudge-holding Taurus, remember? Nibla opened one amber eye, closed it again, and yawned. Clearly, my grudge concerned her exactly 0%. Harper came over with my mocha crowned with whipped cream and chocolate shavings. Here you go, she said. Official medicine for community center directors on the edge of collapse. And by the way, I heard Parker Sloan was in your kingdom yesterday. He came to broadcast from the door, I admitted, blowing at the whipped cream. And he asked my sign live, like the square was a living horoscope. What did you say? Harper asked, delighted. The truth, Taurus. What was I supposed to say, Pisces? I wouldn't know how to fake it that hard. Harper laughed. And he's a Gemini, right? She tilted her head. Air and earth. That makes interesting storms. Harper, I warned. I'm just saying, she shrugged. Besides, I haven't even asked if he's as handsome in person as he sounds on the radio. I'm not answering that, I said, lifting my cup to my lips. Right then, the cafe bell rang again. Destiny has zero subtlety. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. I felt it in the shift of the room's murmur. But I turned anyway because I'm Taurus, not stone. Parker Sloan was shaking snow off his coat near the door, hat in one hand, dark hair a little damp and curlier from the cold. He wore a dark blue sweater that looked dangerously good on him and jeans that, well, they were doing their job. Very funny, universe. This isn't a test, right? Because I am failing it. Our eyes met. He smiled. Of course he smiled. Good morning, Director of Christmas Chaos, he greeted, walking over. Good morning, Schedule Saboteur, I replied. Are you here to negotiate clauses with caffeine too? I'm here to confess my wrongdoing, he said, placing a hand dramatically over his heart. I used you on my show, Valdés. I know, I said. Yesterday, a woman stopped me in the grocery store to tell me she loved the part about rumors being faster than reindeer. See? He grinned. You already have fans. Harper appeared next to him like she'd teleported. And what are you having, radio star? She asked. Whatever the house recommends for convincing a stubborn Taurus, Parker said. Then extra thick hot chocolate and a plate of cookies, she declared. This isn't barista work anymore. This is interstellar mediation. She winked and went back to the counter. Parker sat across from me, placing his phone face down on the table. A good sign. Nebla watched him from the chair beside me like she was evaluating a candidate. Thank you for not kicking me out yesterday, he began. I invaded your community center with a microphone and questions. I still haven't decided whether I'm kicking you out, I said. I have to assess the damage. And the cables. He laughed, leaning forward a little. I came to propose something, he said, and I promise this time it's not live. Quiet, heart. It's not an indecent proposition, probably. I'm listening, I said, resting my elbows on the table. The station is preparing a Christmas Eve special from the square, he explained. Live music, interviews, town stories, the usual. But this year I want it to be different. Less, everything is perfect, and more real Christmases in Hollyridge. He laced his fingers together on the table. And you're literally the person who sees the real part, he added. Everything goes through the community center, toy drives, charity dinners, people who come because they don't want to eat alone. I want you to be part of the special. Not as pretty background, as a voice. I lowered my gaze to my cup so I could think for a second. The chocolate steamed cocoa and rescue. I'm not interested in being a Christmas ornament on your show, I said at last, looking up. I've been a man's ornament once, and I'm not playing that role again. The air shifted by a millimeter. Parker grew serious without losing warmth. I don't want that for you, he said. Not for anyone. But especially not for you. What I'm proposing is... He cut himself off as Harper set his hot chocolate down and slid a plate of 3 Ginger Star cookies onto the table. Heavy artillery, she announced. I'm going to pretend I'm cleaning the machine, but really I'm going to listen to 80% of this conversation. If you end up kissing, I want royalties on the story. There will be no kissing, I protested. Parker smiled, amused. Yet, he murmured so quietly I wasn't sure if I'd actually heard it or if my imagination was misbehaving. Hanna, don't blush. Don't too late. He returned to the point, more formal. Look, he said. I know how to talk. It's my job. But I've also learned thanks to therapy and 1 or 2 legendary screw-ups that I can't decide for other people what's too much for them. So I'm proposing this, you set the rules. He leaned in slightly. If you say no, it's no. I'll find another format. If you say yes, we put your Taurus clauses in writing and I respect them. No, but... I couldn't help smiling at the phrase. Taurus clauses? I repeated. Of course, he smiled. Clause 1. No jokes about your age on air. Not direct, not subtle. Clause 2. Your personal life is not content. If anything we talk about feels too intimate, it doesn't go on the program. Clause 3. If I see your "this is too much" face, I change the subject. No asking you why in front of everyone. I blinked at him. You came prepared, I said. I've been thinking about it since I left the community center yesterday, he admitted. Gemini, but organized. Something loosened in my chest. And you, I added, picking up a cookie. What do you get out of this besides exciting radio minutes? He smiled, but the answer wasn't a joke. I get a program that means something, he said. And the perfect excuse to spend more time with a very interesting Taurus. But if it only stays the first thing, I'll still be satisfied. Great, now my stomach is doing weird things. Very professional. I took a slow breath. I was 41. I'd lived through enough other people's drama and my own to recognize when someone was offering me a display window. And when someone was offering me a place. Okay, I said, I accept. But I want to add a clause. Parker pressed a hand to his heart, theatrical. Shoot, clause 4, I said, counting it off. If this turns into one more stressor instead of something beautiful for the town, I reserve the Taurus right to step away without guilt. And you don't get to do a live on-air drama about it. Accepted, he said immediately. In fact, if that happens, I promise I'll do an entire program about the right to say, I'm done. I laughed, despite myself. You have an answer for everything, don't you? I'm a Gemini, he lifted his hands. But I also have something else. What? The intention not to hurt you, he said simply. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was thick, warm. Harper stopped pretending to clean and watched us from the bar with a small, satisfied smile. Under the table, I felt the soft brush of Nebla's fur against my leg. A second later, the cat stood up, jumped with elegant precision, and installed herself directly on Parker's lap. He froze for a second, surprised. I think I've been chose. Don't say it, I cut him off. If she approves you too quickly, there's no way to kick you off the couch later. Parker laughed, scratching Nebla's head. The cat started purring with the intensity of a vintage engine. Feline betrayal, level 3. Then we have a deal, he said, absent-mindedly petting Nebla. This Christmas Eve, the real Christmas is in Hollyridge, special with Hanna Valdés and Taurus clauses. I still can't get used to hearing my name next to yours like it's the title of a show, I admitted. You'll get used to it, he smiled. And if you don't, you can always fire me live on air. Don't tempt me, Sloan, I said, taking a bite of my cookie. Asterisk. Outside the window, snow kept falling slowly over the square. Inside, the cafe smelled like chocolate and promises I didn't yet know if I wanted to believe. But something in me, the part that hadn't completely surrendered after that broken engagement, stretched like a cat in sunlight, just a little. Enough to see what would happen if, for once, the Taurus let go of the handbrake. If cozy love stories with real women feel like home to you, subscribe and stay. The day before Christmas Eve smelled like wet pine, overheated cables, and hot chocolate spilled somewhere in the square. In other words, progress. Town Hall had set up a small stage in front of the big tree. On one side, the choir's music stands. On the other, a long table for thermoses of cocoa and trays of cookies. In between, a jungle of cables that made you dizzy just looking at it. And there I was again in the middle of it with my folder and my red knit hat. The black cable goes here, I instructed, sweeping my arm. Right along the edge, please. I do not want anyone over 70 doing an involuntary somersault on live radio. Tim, my favorite volunteer, nodded solemnly and kept unspooling cable like he was handling dynamite. In front of the stage, Nebla prowled and sniffed at the trampled snow with the air of a construction site inspector. Every so often she lifted one paw, deeply offended by the cold. But she refused to admit this was an unacceptable environment for a Persian cat. I told you to stay home, I reminded her. She stared at me, turned around, hopped onto a folding chair, and curled up. Feline supervision from above. The tree lights were still off, but they hung there like a promise. There's a special kind of beauty in before something happens. A hush that feels like it's holding the murmur of everything to come. Are you intimidating the cables again? A voice called from behind me. I turned. Parker was at the foot of the stage, a gray Benny pulled down over his ears and a dark coat buttoned up. His nose was a little red from the cold, and his microphone hung off his shoulder like a natural extension of his arm. I'm preventing municipal lawsuits, I corrected. And making sure the Christmas spirit doesn't include broken ankles. Very noble, he said, nodding. Want me to bring you chocolate? You've got the face of someone who argued with 3 council members and won. But at an emotional cost. I argued with 2 council members, thank you, I said. The third surrendered preemptively when he saw me coming with the lists. Parker laughed. That confirms my theory, he said. Taurus is the most underrated sign in the zodiac. Because we're busy holding up the world so everyone else can make jokes on the radio. I shot back. He pressed a hand to his chest like he'd been wounded. I promise to keep the jokes to a responsible maximum, he said. Be right back, don't move. I watched him cross the square toward the community center hot chocolate stand. He greeted everyone. A few older women stopped him to comment on his show, and a couple teenagers asked for selfies. He did it all with genuine patience, not obligation. Great. He's charming with the grandmas, too. Universe, we need to talk about your habit of sending me scarf-wearing temptations. When he returned, he handed me a steaming paper cup. Extra cocoa, he announced. Taurus requirement, according to my notes. I see you keep minutes, I said, wrapping my hands around the warmth. We sat on the edge of the stage with our legs dangling. At that hour, there weren't many people yet, just a few kids practicing laps around the tree and a couple techs fighting with a rebellious spotlight. For a few seconds we just listened, the soft crunch of snow under passing boots, the low hum of the town getting ready.
Hey, Parker said suddenly. Can I ask you something more serious?
If you don't want to, tell me and we'll change the subject. Clause 3. I smiled, remembering. Okay, I nodded. As long as it's not my weight, my bra size, or how many times I've heard all I want for Christmas is you this month. None of those, I promise, he said, lifting both palms. It's about what you said the other day at the cafe. About your ex. The chocolate tasted a little less sweet all of a sudden. What do you want to know? I asked, staring at the dark tree lights. He searched for the words. Was it really hard to stay in this town after all that? You know what Hollyridge is like. Even the bread delivery guy knows who broke up with who. I gave a small laugh without humor. That's true, I admitted. The morning after the breakup, Mrs. Monroe came into the community center with a tray of brownies because she'd heard I might need to talk. She said it so gently it nearly made me cry. Parker listened without interrupting, hands cupped around his own drink. It was hard, I continued. Not so much because of him in the end. Look, if someone thinks making you smaller is love, then they don't understand love. It was hard because of everything that came attached to it. The pity looks, the supermarket whispers. The way people would tell me, but you're so pretty you'll find someone, like being alone automatically, meant being defective. I paused to swallow the knot rising in my throat. I had to rebuild myself, I said quietly. Not into a new version, just back into the woman I was before I started shrinking to fit. Parker's gaze stayed steady, no pity, no performance. Just presence. I'm sorry, he said softly, that you went through that, and thank you for telling me. I shrugged like it was nothing. Because apparently my defense mechanism comes with automatic Taurus settings. I don't tell many people, I admitted. Hollyridge thinks it knows everything already. He turned his cup slightly in his hands, thoughtful. I got an offer, he said, and his voice shifted, just a notch more careful. From the city, bigger station. Bigger paycheck. More everything. My stomach did a slow, unpleasant drop. Oh, I said, aiming for neutral and landing somewhere near fake calm. That's big. It is, he agreed, and I haven't decided yet. I'm not telling you this to make you feel anything. I'm telling you because I don't want to be the guy who springs it on you when it's already done. I stared at the snowy square, the stage, the chords, the tree still dark, still waiting. I appreciate that, I managed. Parker took a breath, like he was choosing every word with care. I also need to tell you something else, he said. Because I'm starting to realize I'm not just collecting pretty moments for the show. My fingers tightened around the cup. What are you collecting then? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. He looked at me, honest in a way that made my chest go tight.
I'm collecting reasons to stay, he said simply.
The air between us went quiet thick with snow and breath and unspoken things. I didn't pull away. I didn't laugh it off. I just sat there, letting the warmth of the cocoa seep into my palms. Then, without thinking, Parker reached out slowly, like he was asking permission with the movement itself, and took my hand, skin warm against cold air. The texture of my glove in my other hand. The gentle weight of his thumb drawing small circles over my knuckles. Nothing dramatic. Nothing cinematic. And yet my heart seemed to find a new rhythm, calmer and more intense at the same time. "I'm going to do something very un-Gemini," he said, half smiling. "I'm not making any impulsive decisions about my future today." "Approved." I nodded. "That actually sounds dangerously Taurus." "I know," he laughed. "You must be infecting me." Right then, a booming voice echoed from the other side of the square. "Valdés! Sloan!" The mayor, of course. "Can you come here a second? The mic on the main stand is squealing and nobody knows why." I sighed. "The magic of Christmas is calling us," I said, trying to pull my hand away. Parker squeezed once before letting go. "This isn't over," he murmured. "Neither is that microphone, apparently," I replied, standing up with my practical voice back in place. We climbed off the edge of the stage. Nibla jumped down from her chair and positioned herself between us, walking toward the stand like she was leading a procession. As we crossed the square, our fingers still remembering the warmth of the other eye, thought maybe the real lighting wouldn't be the tree. Maybe it was what had just happened silently somewhere inside me. December 23rd decided to be dramatic. The snowfall started mid-morning, slow like it only wanted to decorate the rooftops. By afternoon, Hollyridge looked like a snow globe that had been shaken by a hyperactive kid. The town hall, in an unusually sensible move, sent a message to the coordination group. "For safety, the full rehearsal in the square is cancelled. Find indoor alternatives," Harper replied with a gif of a fainting reindeer. I sighed, staring out the window of my office at the community center. The square was now a white blur. The stage, half swallowed by snow. Rehearsing out there would have been an extreme sport. "All right," I muttered. Plan B. The main hall of the center was decorated for the Christmas Eve charity dinner. Warm string lights, red tablecloths, centerpieces made of pine cones and pine branches. In the back, the door to the community kitchen leaked phantom smells from the dozens of meals that had been cooked there over the years. I checked my schedule. For that afternoon it said, "Special radio rehearsal H+P, then it'll be here," I decided. I set up the battlefield, turned on only the lowest lights, left the garlands above the windows glowing, and went straight to the kitchen. If we were going to improvise a radio rehearsal indoors, we were doing it with cookies, rule number 1 of my Taurus life. Everything is more bearable if the oven is on. I was cutting star and heart shapes out of ginger dough when I heard the front door close with a thud softened by snow. "Hanna?" Parker's voice echoed down the hallway. "If this is a Taurus ambush, at least tell me there's chocolate." "Kitchen," I yelled. "And yes, there's chocolate. And butter. And maybe an attempt at therapy, we'll see." Quick footsteps. The shake-off of snow in the entryway. And a few seconds later, Parker poked his head into the kitchen, hair damp and cheeks flushed from the cold. "Wow," he said, stepping fully inside. The oven warmed the room. The air smelled like ginger, cinnamon, and orange zest. Cookie cutters, bowls of icing, trays ready to go in. I was wearing a red apron embroidered with tiny trees. And flour in a strand of hair, probably. "Don't say wow like you just walked into an ad," I protested. "This is work." "Of course," he smiled. "Work. Very serious work." With ginger stars. He took off his coat and hung it on the hook by the door. Under it, he wore a dark green crewneck sweater that emphasized exactly what I did not need emphasized. "I need an internal committee to approve this man's wardrobe before he leaves the house." "I brought the minimum gear," he said, lifting a small backpack. "Recorder, 2 mics, headphones. My plan is to make a demo version of the Christmas Eve show just in case tomorrow the square still looks like a war zone." "Perfect," I nodded. I brought dough, molds, and moderate expectations. Right then, something gray slipped through the half-open door. Niebla planted herself in the doorway, sniffed the air, and blinked slowly. "I knew if I followed the heat I'd find you here," Parker said, crouching. "Hi, Niebla." The cat walked up, rubbed against his leg, then hopped onto one of the chairs positioned perfectly to see the counter and, of course, judge everything. "Great," I said. "Now we have the supervision committee. Parker set the backpack down and pulled out the recorder. How about I leave it running and we forget it's here? He asked. Later, if there's anything you don't want aired, we delete it. No debate. I thought about it. Talking while making cookies was a lot less intimidating than talking in front of half the town. Fine, I said. But if you say something really stupid, I'll use it against you. Totally fair, he grinned. He turned the recorder on, checked levels, and clipped a tiny lapel mic to the collar of my sweater. His fingers brushed my collarbone for a second, and my skin decided it was the perfect moment to activate full goosebumps. Okay, nervous system, can we not react like a teenager at her first dance every time someone touches you? All right, he said, clipping on his own mic. Whenever you're ready. You can ignore that this is an interview and pretend I'm just a very curious guy asking questions while you do oven magic. That's already true even without mics, I shot back. He laughed, leaned against the counter, and motioned for me to keep working with the dough. Okay, Valdés, he started, in his host voice but more intimate. We're in the community center kitchen. It smells unfairly good, and I've just discovered you turn into a fairy godmother when flour is involved. Question 1. What place does food hold in your Christmas? I snorted a laugh. Trick question, I said. I'm a Taurus. Food is the base language. Other people come with English or French. I come with stew. I cut a star and placed it on the tray. In my house, I continued, it was always like that. My grandmother made 12 dishes because, at Christmas, nobody goes hungry. When I took charge of the community center, I promised it would be the same here. Nobody would eat dinner alone if I could help it. And you, he asked, do you eat alone? For a second, the dough stuck to my fingers. Sometimes, yes, I admitted. Or with Nibla, or Harper, or my parents on a video call. And it's fine. It's not a permanent romantic tragedy. I set another star on the tray. There were years, I added, when I thought that if I didn't have a partner at Christmas, it meant I'd failed. Because everything from movies to candy commercials sells you the idea that the end goal is the kiss under mistletoe with the perfect partner. But then you look around, the neighbor who lost her husband, the guy who moved here for work, the woman who comes to help because she can't stand her empty house. And you realize Christmas has more shapes than a cookie heart. Parker nodded. His gaze was so attentive I had to look at the rolling pin for a second so I wouldn't melt on the spot. I like that, he said. More shapes than a cookie heart. I'm stealing that. I'll charge you royalties in the form of coffee, I warned. He smiled, and after a second of silence, he asked another question. You talked about your grandma, the meals, the center. But you didn't say what you like most about your own body at Christmas. An incredulous laugh escaped me. Excuse me? Yes, he insisted gently. We've heard 1,000 people talk about working off the nougat January diets. I want, just once, for this special to include a woman speaking kindly about her body. And you were the first person I thought of. I stared at him half scandalized, half oddly flattered. You know you're stepping onto sensitive ground, right? I said. I know, he admitted. That's why, if you don't want to answer, you tell me and we change the subject. No explanations. I thought about it. I could dodge with a joke. I could go ironic and keep cutting stars. But I'd spent years trying to make other people feel less alone at this time of year. Maybe I could do a little of that work for myself, too. My arms. I said at Law Street. Parker blinked, surprised. Your arms? Yes, I nodded. They're strong. They've carried boxes, tables, sacks of food, crying kids, grandmothers who couldn't stop hugging you. They've held people while they fell apart in the kitchen stirring soup. They also hold me up when I think I can't do all this. For years I felt self-conscious because they aren't thin or delicate or anything you see in party dress ads. Until one day I realized if my arms could charge by the hour, they'd be rich. So I decided they deserved my respect. There was a brief silence. Then I heard Parker exhale. This, he said, is exactly what I want people to hear on Christmas Eve, if you want to. Of course! I felt a sting of emotion and a small spark of pride. I'll think about it, I said. Depends on my panic attack level that day, and I'll be there with the fire extinguisher, he promised. We kept cutting cookies for a few minutes in a comfortable quiet. Just the snap of the cutter against dough, the soft hum of the oven, and Nebula purring now parked on a corner of the counter like she was part of the decor. And you? I asked suddenly, what do you like least about these dates? Parker leaned against the table, ankles crossed. The feeling that everything has to be perfect, he said. The perfect show, the perfect moment, the mayor's perfect speech. In the city it was worse if a graphic came in late. If a joke didn't land online, they'd eat you alive. Here it's gentler, but the pressure still sticks to your ribs. He rubbed his chest like he could scrape the weight off. Also, he added, looking straight at me, I hate feeling like I'm always passing through. This year, for example. I know my contract ends in a few months. I know that offer is sitting there, and at the same time, his gaze didn't flinch. I'm starting to feel like I belong here. Like I belong here, in this kitchen, in your chaos. My heart did another one of those unapproved little leaps. My chaos sounds very committed, I said, trying to lighten it. It is, he smiled. I've spent years being the fun guest in other people's lives. The guy who makes jokes, the guy who energizes the party, the guy who leaves before it gets uncomfortable. With you, I don't want to leave before it gets uncomfortable. I want to stay and see what happens. The dough almost stopped existing in my hands. Parker, you don't have to say anything, he rushed. I just wanted you to know. I'm terrified about the job decision, and still, when I think about leaving, the image that comes isn't the radio booth in the city. It's this counter, your hands covered in flour, and that cat staring at me like I'll vanish if I mess up. I glanced at Nebula. As if she understood, she blinked slowly. She won't let you vanish, I murmured. I took a breath, wiped some flour from my fingers with a towel, and turned fully toward him. I'm going to tell you something, I began. And then we can pretend it was the blood sugar. Parker nodded, very serious. I don't know what you'll decide about your job, I continued. And I'm not going to play tough and say I don't care if you go or stay. I care, a lot more than I'd like at this point in the year. But whatever happens, I'm not the woman who rearranges her whole life around someone else's schedule anymore. If you stay, I want it to be because this place and these people, I gestured at myself with a flour-smudged hand, are on the list of things you choose, not on the list of things that chain you.
His eyes lit up with emotion.
And maybe a bit from the warm kitchen lights. Let's say it was the light. You're ruining my ability to ever settle for less, he murmured. That's the point, I replied. For a few seconds we just looked at each other. The garlands reflected tiny golden sparks in his pupils. Nebula's purr grew louder, like a soundtrack. Hanna, he said, lowering his voice a little, can I ask you something? Outside the contract? Depends, I answered. If it's about the square lights, no. It's not about the square lights. He stepped closer. He was so near I could see a tiny flower spot on his sweater, definitely my fault. I want to kiss you, he said bluntly. But only if you want it too. The honesty hit me like a warm bolt of lightning. No games, no assumptions. Direct question. Emergency exit included. My first reaction was mental. Are we sure about this, Hanna? Do you remember the last time you kissed someone with this much intensity? Do you remember how it ended? My second reaction was physical. A spark from my stomach to the back of my neck. And a quiet yes somewhere that was exhausted from being afraid all the time. Yes, I said softly. I want to... There was no swelling music, no slow-motion snowfall. Just his hands moving slowly to my waist, like he was approaching something valuable without wanting to scare it, and my body responding before my brain could argue. Our lips met with a softness that threw me off more than any stolen, urgent kiss ever could. It was a first touch, a question. I answered by leaning in, a clear response. The world narrowed to that, the warmth of his mouth, the smell of ginger and cocoa, the texture of his sweater under my fingers. He deepened the kiss with a care that made me feel more desired than any kind of rush ever had. His hand slid up my back, tracing my curve with reverent respect. My whole body responded like it had been waiting years for someone to touch it this way, not to change it, not to assess it, but to celebrate it. The recorder was still on somewhere on the counter. The radio. I managed to whisper, between laughter and fast breaths. Parker rested his forehead against mine, his lips still brushing mine. If this got recorded, he panted, I'll delete it. I swear you'd better, I said. Nibla, who had been suspiciously quiet, chose that moment to intervene with a long, offended meow, as if reminding us she was still in the room. We both burst into laughter, cracking the perfect tension without breaking it. "I think the supervisor is demanding a break," he said. "The supervisor demands you don't use her human as content," I added. Parker looked at me, suddenly serious. "Never," he said. There was another kiss, shorter but just as full of promises, and then the oven beeped to announce the first batch was ready. Almost poetic. My first kiss in years interrupted by ginger cookies. Very on brand for me. I shut off the alarm, pulled out the tray, and an even richer smell filled the kitchen. The oven's heat hit my face, mixing with the heat already inside me. As I moved the cookies onto a cooling rack, I felt his hands rest briefly on my hips, steady, calm, sure. No one else needed to know exactly how that afternoon ended. Let's just say there were more kisses, a few cookies slightly forgotten at the edge of a bit too done, and a private fade to black that not even Nibla protested much. When we checked the recording later, it had only kept our voices talking about bodies, fear, and second chances. The rest stayed in that kitchen, stuck to warm tiles, flour in the air, and the new certainty that maybe this Christmas was going to look different for me. A shape that wasn't in the ads, but one that looked a lot like my strong arms around the neck of a Gemini, while the snow kept falling outside.